welcome to the leadership panel discussion. We do this every year at the gathering, and the intent is to sort of hear from industry leaders in terms of how they see. I mean, each one of them here is running, as very senior level positions, and a lot of the times we want to hear their perspective, right? Because we often think of Agile from sort of the team level down, but today's discussion was around let's hear a little bit from the leadership side. And the theme today, again, our whole theme for this event is called Inspire. It's all about inspiration. And so today's topic is what can leaders do to actually make that happen? Can they actually do something different than what we do today? And that's the topic for this whole discussion. So let me sort of welcome you guys. Welcome. We're going to sort of set up some ground rules, in the beginning. So my first thing is like how to deal with questions. There's many of you. So the first thing is, hopefully there's something on your table to write. If not, the volunteers will bring something around. So as you go through the session, we'll reserve the last 10-15 minutes for discussions. So if you can write the question down, and if you have a question, write it down and raise your hand, and then some volunteer will walk to you, and they're there. So Sanjay is there. Madhavi is there, Gautam is there, and Mahesh is here. So any of these guys, you can just raise the hand, they'll pick up the question, and they're going to bring it into Gautam, and Gautam is going to be sorting those questions in the front, so he's going to be managing that. So then at the end of the session, we'll reserve time to pick up questions. Okay, so that way, we keep the focus of what we're trying to do and not disrupt the thought process, but then we'll also pick up all the questions as we go. Is it okay? Yeah. So I want to sort of introduce, each one of them. So Arvind has been a great friend of mine, Arvind Rathore. So I've learned a lot from him over the years. He lives in Bangalore. Arvind, do you want to introduce? So there are two mics, so that we have to share. So maybe you guys can share that. So and then Arvind, so do you want to introduce yourself first? Like, what do you do, or anything you want to? How would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Vibhu. And thanks for inviting us for this panel discussion. So I'm Arvind Rathore, and I'm the Global Agile Transformation Leader at Shell. I've taken this responsibility quite recently. And earlier to this, I was heading the Agile Transformation, amongst other things, at a global large bank called Societe Generale. So I have a bit of experience there on leading how Agile Transformation sort of can be done. Right, so that's a little bit about my background. Who do you, John?
Thank you very much. Glad to be here. Don't have really a traditional technical background. As a matter of fact, I have no technical background whatsoever. I started out in banking and commodity lending a couple of lifetimes ago. Got into the oil industry. I was chief financial officer of oil company in the United States. Moved into investment banking, did a stint doing turnaround consulting where I would step in and take over companies that were on the decline, try to turn them around or shut them down, which naturally led me into the Agile space. And I, with my brother, purchased Solutions IQ back in 2006, was most recently CEO there, and then after we were acquired by Accenture on June 2nd, I'm now a managing director in Accenture and still responsible for supporting the Solutions IQ operation.
Thanks, John.
It's really nice to actually have such a great co-panel here with me, along with Vibhu, who's moderating this. So I'm excited and thrilled to be here. There's an interesting story around living in Bangalore. I moved here a couple years back from San Jose, where I was working with PayPal as well. And I kind of realized that it's really hard to be fashionably late. I mean, the cool thing about being fashionably late, you can just either be grossly late, or you're going to land up planning so ahead of time that you'll probably be ahead of time. That aside, a little bit about me. I've been a techie all my life, unlike what John just said, about 20 odd years. Been with PayPal for about 10 of them. We underwent a very significant agile transformation within our organization. And let's admit it, it hasn't been easy, but it's the right thing to do. So I'm kind of glad that I'm going to be here talking about it. Thanks.
Awesome. So I want to start with some questions. So some of the questions I had actually shared with them, but some questions I didn't share with them, right? So this was a question that I had not shared with them. I want to open up with, so Agile means a lot, different things to different people. Everybody's definition of this is different. But I'm curious from your definitions, if you guys have to define Agile, and this is for any one of you or all of you, what would it be for you?
Okay, so for me, I mean, there's an Agile manifesto, and there are the various definitions there. If you were to, push me to the wall and say what is sort of one phrase or one line that equates agility for me, it's about responding to change, right? So I don't equate agility to Scrum or a process, besides being in a Scrum gathering conference. But to me, Agile is not Scrum, right? It's about responding to change. So if I were to define it in one sentence, that's what I would equate agility to.
Awesome, thank you.
I just would like to add one quick thing to that. I actually agree. In fact, that's why it makes more sense for us to move into that space so quickly, because we've come to realize that the rate of disruption, right, has been so constant ever since, right? Traditionally growing up, I never really thought that we'd be actually dealing with mobile devices all the time. I mean, like being connected to the internet all the time. In fact, computers barely existed my time when I was studying, right? So if you actually look at the world we are in, it is absolutely important and vital to stay even existent. It's a survival need for every business to be agile today, because the rate of disruption is so high that if you cannot adapt and bring yourself to take on to it, you're going to not exist after a year or two.
Thank you. John, do you have anything?
Yeah, actually, I'd follow on to that. So I think there are a couple things, that I'd say, but just as a tag onto this is what I really think is awesome about this space is for the first time, we have an intersection between kind of altruism and shareholder value. And so when you talk about the need to move in this space, it's the shareholder value to maintain it, but we have to do it by empowering people that in the past were pushed down. So it's the first time where that alignment of shareholder value kind of comes in. So I think that's awesome. What I would say just to more specifically is I think the word agile has been one of the things that has slowed down agility, just because there are so many interpretations of it. Like you say, it might be process focused. Oh, that's Scrum, right? That's what it, and I think where I try to focus when we talk to folks is around it's continuous improvement, continuous innovation. And if you're trying to build an engine for those two things, then you're a company that's trying to become an agile company.
I sort of, for me, I've been doing this for so long, and I don't know anything else. It's 1996 is when I started doing Agile. So for me, it's really like doing simple things, like being home, managing your lifestyle, having time to do things, So for me, the context is very personal. Yes, there is a business side to that as well. But I really believe now, after 17 years of doing this, it's within. For me, it's a very personal thing. Have we made an impact on people? Are we doing the right things with everybody? Are we treating everyone well? Those sorts of things. And to your point, Anshu, you were saying something about Agile and the work, the innovation disruption. Last week, 2 days ago, we had dinner at home, and we had a niece of mine who had come home, and she just said, "Hey, I just got my first job." So that's nice, and we're chatting with her, and she's a software engineer with her first job, and she said, "Hey, can you explain to me this Scrum thing, because I've been told about this Scrum, So I started explaining to her, and over the conversation, the point was not about Scrum, we started talking about something about like Telegraph, or what is this thing we used to send before? Before cell phones, we used to make these calls, right? Trunk calls. So we were just checking to see, some topic came, and we said trunk call. She said, "What is a trunk call?" What is that? Because for what I realized at that point is, boy, these people are now entering our workforce. This is a group that's not aware. This is the post-Facebook era team coming into our workforce. So I see that as a big change in how leaders have to evolve, right? So my ask, I think one of the things we'll go into a little bit deeper here later and as well tomorrow is, do we need to change a little bit of our thinking now that we have the fresh new people coming in who have no idea what a lot of the things we grew up with, they probably will have no idea what those things might be, right? So we'll sort of talk through them maybe as we go through that. So I mean, one of the things I also noticed, right, so is that when we talk about change, and I'm sure you guys have seen in your agile transformation journeys or in your organizations, when you led any sort of agile movement, did you have to make any personal change within yourself, in your style of leadership, or any personal trait change, like noticeable that you had to do to yourself in order to lead an agile organization the way you guys have done?
Sure. Actually, one of the, interestingly, what you realize is while you get the value of it as you hear it, because it's very obvious to you, interestingly, it requires a lot of change in the people element of it, the actual organizational change, which is hard, right? As much as we want to be able to change quickly, and that's what we're calling agility, truth is Rome wasn't built in a day, right? And actually creating that conversion from being a waterfall or whatever model that you've been following into following an agile model requires a lot of mindset change and culture change, which is slow. So I think the biggest thing that I had to accept more than change was that to understand that there will be people who will not believe in it, right? Actually coming to an acknowledgement that that's going to be a reality despite whatever I might think or my convictions might be was something that to me was an eye-opener. And it actually took a little longer to acknowledge and address it, because it's important to address it. Because if you were to believe, I mean, through your logical thinking, yeah, it makes sense, this is the right thing to do, then why wouldn't anybody and everybody do it, right? But I think that same value translation needs to happen at all levels, because this isn't about you following an agile methodology, it's your organization following it, including the last level of developer within your team, right? They need to understand the value. It needs to mean something back to them, and it needs to mean value back on their empowerment. So I think that was the biggest change, acknowledging that not everybody is going to see the value straight away. And it will take time, so have some patience around it.
Oh, that's what is making this. How about you, John? Anything, or Arvind, for you guys? Anything that you had?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was more egocentric, and everything that I had done up until I learned about the Agile space was really all about making quick decisions, being very much of a hard driver, wanting to be the voice in the room that solved the problem. And, so you kind of go through life and you actually con yourself into believing that you have these superhuman powers. So to get to the point where you can reflect on yourself enough to say, you know what, as I back away from trying to drive every single decision, I'm finding the decisions are getting better. And you recognize, well, maybe the problem was me, all along. So I think my biggest change was really helpful for me personally, and was to kind of get over myself and realize that, collaboration and all the wonderful people that I've worked with for all these years and maybe have never given the energy or the time for them to, kind of talk, has led to less than the results that there could have been. So that was for me.
Right, so you're saying what personal changes have you gone through
In yourself.
in myself, besides the gray hair, is I mean, there are tremendous changes, right? So like John said, you believe that you know all about Agile, and you can, but Agile transformation is all about change management, right? Most of the people who've gone through this will realize that. So it's not like a software upgrade from version 9 to 10, and requires so much, right? Change management, this will require, as Anshu was alluding to, changes to your process tools, but besides that, the changes to the culture and behavior across the organization, not only the project teams. So what I've learned through, and what I've gone changes in my personal side, as I've learned to be patient. So you learn how to take people along. So despite the fact that you know that there are benefits in Agile, it's not that here I come and then let's do Agile, right? It's to take people along. You have to be patient The results don't show up overnight. You got to develop it, and few years from now, you will see that the effort that you put in has been worth as an organization, right? So how do you sell that? How do you convince? How do you keep people motivated? And those are the traits that you, if you don't have, you learn those things as you go along this major transformation in terms of changing the organization.
Thank you. So I mean, they always say, right, a leader is someone who is not something you're doing today, but have you left something back? So when someone else takes over after 7 years, 8 years, all the things you are doing 7, 8 years is still being followed, right? So that's sort of how I view what you just said, right? So patience is the key, is what I'm hearing. So just some sort of personal note with John, so I know John, so he's been my boss, now he's a colleague, a friend, I'm in all kinds of relationships with him. And so 10, 11 years ago, when I know him for like 12, 13 years now, and so one day, and I used to go with him all the time to solve problems, like John help me with this, John help me with that, and it was so easy, just go to John and solve the problem, right? And so we got used to that, and then so it was sort of a natural thing for many of us at Solutions IQ to go to John, solve problem, And so one day I went to John, and I think somewhere he got coached. I don't know what happened to him, So we go there, and I asked something I was saying. I said, John, something, and I remember him saying, so what have you done about it? And it took me by 2 minutes, by surprise, because he had never said this so far, But I took that to my heart to say, you know what, that's right. I haven't really done anything about it. All I'm trying to do is like complain about something, So since then, it's been a noticeable change. I think a lot I practice is like when I give some, let's say there's a problem, instead of going and just complaining to someone, I'll say, and I ask that now to people I work with, is give us an idea to fix the problem. So a lot of leadership I felt was impactful. Those little words that you make leave a lot of impression on people over a period of time. So it's like finding that right nugget of the word. So that was a huge thing that I learned from John. I don't know when, some 4 or 5 years ago, 6, 7 years ago, I don't know when. Right? So thanks for that, John. So as we move on, right, guys, I think one of the things I want to ask you is that, I mean, you've gone through your organizations and where you are right now, given that you are in PayPal and in Shell and Accenture, what is the biggest challenge, today, right? What are you trying to solve today, as of like just before you came, what is the biggest impediment in your mind that you're trying to solve for the organization?
Right, so if you're asking in context of an agile transformation,
I'm pretty open about it,
Right. So most of the agile transformations, if not all, if I put it into sort of phases of where you are, and that will reflect on what kind of impediments or what kind of challenges are you facing, right? So the initial part is always about why do you want to do agile, right? What is the purpose of doing it, right? And that's where you have challenges around convincing people, your leaders, on why should we do it, right? Once you're over that part, it's all about how are you going to do it and what are you going to do about it, right? So there are challenges around, do we have enough coaches? What are the processes you're going to change? Are you going to have enough trainings for the leaders to change? What are the tools you're going to have for the support? So a number of things around that piece, right? And the last phase, as I always feel, when once you've done the transformation is never done, it's all about then sustaining that and being there, and then continuously improve from there, right? So to answer your question specifically, the previous organization that I was part of was in a phase that our challenges were to the part of where we have done it, and now it's all about sustaining it and further improving it from there. Whereas in my current organization is about now convincing people why do we want to do it, not because the other guy is doing it, but what's in it for us. So that's the challenge that is there for today.
So we have an interesting one, Vibhu. We were acquired by Accenture on June 2nd, and prior to that, I think everybody at Solutions IQ took great pride in the fact that we had a company which, top to bottom, everybody had very much of an agile spirit. We were always pushing the envelope of what running a company in a purely agile way meant. We have very open feedback loops. There's no fear of retribution. People speak honestly about when things are going good and when they're not going so well. So that was great. And we just got acquired by a big company. And as part of the process of kind of doing the evaluation on both sides, there were a lot of discussions about culture. And our new colleagues on the Accenture side were very adamant about the fact that what you guys have been doing, please keep doing. We think it's great. So, and so far, that's kind of where we are, kind of how this is going. But I think there's an element for being a small company in a large ecosystem like that, to ensure that we can keep those elements of our culture and will, be maintained as Solutions IQ that we've had before, and still be able to leverage the great things that Accenture, also brings to the table. So I think that's something that, Vibhu, myself, and others in this room are going to be, kind of working through. But so far, so good. But we still got to figure that out a bit.
Thank you.
Actually, it's very interesting that as we say that, yeah, we want to be agile, we want to be able to change our business to meet our customers' needs. The reality is also that we with the shareholder market that exists, right, that John was alluding to, they want the predictability. They want to know that what is it that you're attacking next, and maybe how you're attacking it, yeah, we leave that to you, right? Now, what happens in that mix is, what's really happening is you want to actually be able to say in a predictable manner what your business outcomes are going to be, and you want to plan that ahead of time, right? Versus, how you want to do it, you want to kind of put that in place too, right? Because if you want to achieve that in the next quarter, then hoping you've planned that in place, right? And just then, like, how do you accommodate for enough amount of space in your velocity to make sure that if there is a disruption or a change, you can not only accommodate that, you could actually lead forward with that. And that becomes a very, difficult space to operate in reality, right? When you actually set the whole thing in motion. And I think despite the transformation, despite like getting the people, which was hard part, and despite getting all that through, it's still really hard to build that fine balance day in, day out. It does play out, particularly at leadership and at all levels for that matter, where you need to strike that balance of guaranteeing a predictable business outcome to some extent, but at the same time being agile and accommodating for room for disruption. So
like, one of the things I'm hearing all three of you say is that Scrum is just not enough, right? But I thought as a certified Scrum trainer that Scrum solves world's problems. So am I wrong in that thinking? What do you guys think about just that? What is the solution for all the things you're talking about then, if not Scrum?
So Scrum's really good, Vibhu. It is. It's awesome. But I would say if the goal is to live a healthy life, walking every morning for 30 minutes it's a great practice, right? That is a step in the direction of leading a healthy life. But that in and of itself isn't going to get you where you want to be. And I'd say Scrum is a practice which is a great healthy practice in the Agile space, but that in and of itself doesn't get to where you want to go. It's a tool in the toolkit. So my opinion.
If that's not enough, so from your perspective, what else is missing? Is there something else we should know? Is it Kanban you're recommending? I'm not understanding the answer here. So the things you're describing are just business problems, right? But I am a Scrum trainer, so is there a gap that's missing here?
So just to explain, right, I think we're talking a lot in the context of software development methodologies for the most part, right? But the truth is software development, even though I'm actually from a true blood technology company, truth is at the end of the day, it serves a business purpose, right? The technology is not truly, even though we are a technology company, that's not our true outcome. Our true outcome is meeting customer needs. What we've done in the process is, because we are so heavily invested in technology, we are actually looking to improve our means to meet the customer needs better, right? And Scrum is one of those things that you would follow during software development lifecycle. But what about the other functions? Because the reality is, at the end of all of this are people, right? People are building the software, and there are people who are using it, right? Our customers are people, and the people who are building it are people. Have we thought of what is the agility that we need within the organization for HR, for instance, right? Have we thought of what's the agility we need in the sales and marketing space, for instance, right? And does Scrum really meet all those needs? Give you another example, and I think we were discussing this as well before we came in here around DevOps, which was more around continuous integration and delivery models, right? Though it's an aspect of development itself, yes, it can line well with Scrum, but truly you'll have to build those things in place to give you the true agility that we're talking about. Scrum is only a piece of the puzzle.
So I hear a lot of something called business agility these days. It's sort of the next buzzword. I don't know what it means exactly. But so if Scrum is one aspect of it, and a lot of what it describes are like beyond the IT, right? Sales and marketing and things like that, and then business agility. So is there a description that we want to set here in this stage in terms of how, like Scrum for me, when I say define, it's a framework, So if we had to come up with a definition of this business agility thing, would one of you want to say, any one of you, how would you think, how do we define that? Is there a definition for that now in the industry?
Not that I know of a particular definition or a manifesto around business agility, but my answer there would be that a lot of these principles, right, that are there when we talk about Scrum, when we talk about Agile, can be extended to, for that matter, anything. For that matter, anything, whether it's on the business side or there are support functions, HR, finance, what have you, right? So you don't want to be in a situation where, typically where these transformations start are in the IT functions, right? And over the years, what happens is that you will have a development team which is agile and sort of churning out the code, at the rate that you need. But then you'll hit a bottleneck where, you'll have the operations teams not following probably the same principles. So you get them together and, you probably call that, for the lack of a better word now, DevOps, right? And then your IT, for that matter, becomes agile. What about the people who are going to take decisions, who have their eyes and ears on the market? Are they following some of these principles, right? Are the support functions that the IT needs from an HR perspective, or vendor management, finance, or what have you, are they following the similar principles, right? So long story short, and what I'm trying to tell is that a lot of these principles, what we use in Scrum, or for that matter, what we call in the larger scheme of things Agile, which includes engineering practices, DevOps, and all of that, those principles can be extended to on the business side as well, right? And then, you can solve those problems. So I would hesitate to give that specific definitions of this is business agility, but that's my larger point, that extend those principles to the business side as well, and then you'll probably get the similar results of what you were trying to achieve from Scrum.
So I'm talking about the whole value stream going from the user back to the user.
Exactly.
Right? So how we work through all of that. All of this is sort of a definition of business agility. Okay, just a similar thought on you guys.
Sure, I can also add a few things. Particularly when we talk about Agile, truly what we want to achieve is business agility, at least in my opinion, right? We've followed Scrum practices, again, in the context of companies which have been primarily technology-driven. However, the truth is, the goal has always been to get to a state where my business can always give me the kind of results that I want, satisfying my customer segment appropriately in the disruptive market. So the whole need for Agile and Scrum came into existence because there was a need for business agility to begin with. And that's why we today talk about being able to do things in shorter cycles. You know what, let's take a risk. We don't know what the customer really wants. Let's try this out. Let's fail fast. Let's figure it out if we failed. If we haven't failed, that's great. We are one step closer to utopia, right? And that's kind of the model that we've picked, and we've picked it consciously because that's what we want for our business at the end of the day. So I kind of feel like business agility is the end goal that we are looking.
So I'm hearing you say words like fail fast. I heard you say moving it upstream, so it's not just from IT down. DevOps was a lot about involving the ops little up with the dev, but we lost the people on the top from the product to the dev. So the business agility, from what I'm saying, hearing all of us say, is it's the whole value chain. Right? So,
I would say, actually, when I think of it, I pull delivery out of the equation simply because there is lots of emphasis in practices like Scrum that are already associated around delivery. What I see, or when I think of this, and as you say, it's a term from which we all can define, is it's an organization that is trying to, maybe if you do have some of these practices that are in place on the delivery side, is trying to become a responsive organization. So what do you do to your governance system to be able to real-time make changes? How do you actually turn around and have feedback loops that go from bottom of the organization to the top of the organization? How do you, so part of it's market need, market responsiveness, but internally, what are you doing? So as an organization, how are we becoming a responsive organization, kind of throughout?
thanks, John. So I have moving a little different topic, and we have a few minutes, so we will probably close, and we'll come to the audience questions in some time. This question is specific to sort of John here, and I'm going to ask him. And the question is around sort of, you have traveled both to India and you've been in the US for some time, and you made a few trips to India, right? And you met a lot of organizations. So have you seen a difference? If I had to ask you, have you experienced any challenges in Agile in the Indian context? And I'm going to start the question with you, John. What would
He knows what my answer is going to be.
Anything that you particularly noticed that was different?
Yeah, I think there's two things. One is just the dynamic shift from, because most of the time it's spent is either in the US or in India. But there's very much of a dynamic shift when we're working with organizations around transformation. In the US, there's a lot more product ownership that lives in the US than that lives here. So the problems that we see in transformation in India are more delivery focused than in the US. It might be kind of that connectivity to the customer and actually being able to be responsive, that kind of thing. So with that caveat, I think one of the things that we've seen with clients here and then throughout, which I think is an interesting element of Indian culture, and this is kind of the concept that a title really matters, and it matters quite a bit to people in this country. And I won't say that it doesn't matter to people in the US, but I think people in the US can move more quickly to, if the compensation's there and they're going to be a player on the team, call me whatever you want. As a matter of fact, there's kind of this millennial attitude of, yeah, let's just call ourselves whatever we want, let's not worry about it. And it seems as though that the kind of concept of what the title is here makes a difference, and that can, as we know, in a team-based environment, lead to something less than what we want.
So one of my fun experiences with title is once I was doing an interview with the person joining us, and so he loved everything about the offer. And then he said, "Can I join you in 6 months?" I said, "Why? Why not now?" He said, "Well, Vibhu, I'm going to get married right now. So my in-laws will not allow me, if I work for, your title is simple, because we call everybody a senior consultant, He said, the other organization is giving me a senior director kind of a position, so let me join there and I'll get married, but after 6 months, I will, I'll come back. So in the beginning, I felt like I thought that's silly, right? But when I actually thought about it, it did make sense, because I felt like in that context, it wasn't possibly that was true, right? I think that's sort of a reality that I sort of acknowledge, right? So we have a few more minutes, and I want to sort of close, and I want to take audience questions. So the topic was Inspire Agile, right? So if each one of you had to give some sort of recommendations to our audience on what they should be doing to inspire their people they work with, 1 or 2 ideas for them, right? What would be your 1 or 2 recommendations be for the audience for inspiring agility or inspiring someone in their organization?
Okay, so from my side, there are a lot of things that you can sort of talk about, but if I, again, summarize in one advice that I would want to give is, as a leader, listen and understand. is what I'll say. So whether it is your customers or your employees, you get a lot of insights into what the problems are, and then therefore you're trying to solve the right problem. So if you listen and if you understand the problem, a lot of things get placed into the right spot. So that's what I would advise the leaders.
Yeah, and I'm just going to follow on that. I think depending upon where you are in the organization, the higher up that you are, I think people don't appreciate the amount of power, organizational power they have when they walk into a conference room. And I found as I climbed up that my jokes got funnier. It's like everything you do is, it's like, oh yeah, I guess I really am becoming quite a comedian here. It's like anything you do, you get the responsiveness that people think you want. And being able to just shut up is really the best thing you can do to be in a conference room and not be the first one to talk and not be the third one to talk, but let ideas come up, give encouraging comments when people are saying things as opposed to having to drive the conversation is where I'd go with that.
Just one add-on that I think I have found it fairly useful has been that inspiring confidence in others and saying that, hey, I think you're actually making the right decisions. I want you to make the decisions. And pushing them towards it has helped systematically get them to a point where you have decision makers across your value chain where you are not necessarily making decisions, and you're letting others make the decisions, which brings in a lot of value. It brings in ownership, because if it is my decision, I'm going to stick to it, like it or not. We all have egos. I mean, yeah, we can all think we have bigger as we grow up in the ladder, but that's not true, right? Each one of us carries with us an ego, and that's a reality. And so letting each person make that decision, as long as there is sufficient vetting of objectivity, logic, and analysis that is satisfactory, you should actually enforce and make it a policy that everyone should be making their own decisions at their own levels and reducing the amount of decision that's being made at higher levels. Because as much as you move higher, you realize the littler you know about the details, and your decisions are poorer as a result, and you see greater value. And I think that's something that I'd like everybody to follow.
Thank you. So the summary of what I heard is listen and act, on one side, less you talk, let people who know the information make the decision, rather than you deciding and opening up and setting a tone and being okay with some of those decisions that's being done, as long as you set up an overall context, but don't worry about the decision because they know best in terms of how they do it. Thank you.